So in my first video, I talked about how my goal is to become moderately competent at creating art, or some art at any rate. And I said that the first thing that I want to do is to set the scene in each of the 4 areas that I'm interested in improving on this coming year in 2023, starting with drawing portraits. My other 3 areas are figure drawing, learning digital painting skills, and then just drawing generally, increasing the range of subjects that I know how to draw, or I have at least tried to draw. So I'm going to start by talking about portrait. And the reason I'm starting with this is that this is actually the topic that made me want to continue. And this story starts with me deciding that I wanted to learn to draw towards the end of 2015. So to put this in context, at the time I was trying to find a hobby that was a little more home-based and that could be picked up and put down more easily than my existing hobbies. The reason being that at the time I was very ill and I was struggling to put together time where I felt well enough to do anything active. And so a hobby where I was mostly sitting at a desk and I could take breaks regularly and it wouldn't affect me too badly was actually really appealing. So I kind of had been casting around and I had tried a few different things out and nothing had really grabbed me. And then I bought a book called something like Learn to Draw in 30 Days by Mark Kistler. I was not the target audience. The target audience for this book is very young people, probably teenagers or younger, and I was 41 when I bought this book. But I actually really enjoyed it. It introduces you to a series of sort of fundamental ideas with these little fun, pretty cute little projects that you do one a day for 30 days. And I was spending 30 to 45 minutes a day on this, and I found it really enjoyable. And as I got towards the end of the book, I was like, okay, but what do I do next? How do I continue? And the thing that I decided to continue with was going through the book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. So this is a book that's widely recommended to beginners, and it's not inherently the worst book in the world. I think that the book was written as an attempt to explain a phenomenon that Betty Edwards had already observed. And she attempts to explain how adult learners can be brought from a stage of not really understanding how to go about drawing from life to drawing subjects from life with relative success in a fairly short period of time. And the way that she's attempted to explain this is with a kind of interpretation of what was then very popular neuroscientific ideas. Since then, even a complete layperson like me knows that some of that neuroscience has been deprecated or moved on from, or it's been decided it's a lot more complex than it originally looked back in the day. And so the book reads a little pseudoscientific at this point. But I actually don't think it matters, because I think the theory came after the practice. And the practice of doing these exercises is surprisingly effective. And it teaches some really core lessons really well. So there are actually 2 pieces to the book that you can buy. You can buy the book itself, which is quite long and has a lot of these kind of neuroscientific ideas built into it, which are of dubious value. And there is also a book which is called the Workbook, which basically only contains the exercises and some templates within which to do them. And I think the Workbook is really worth the money. So I went through the Workbook, and the famous thing, the thing that you find if you Google drawing on the right side of the brain before and after, the famous exercise that this brings up is people are asked on the very first section of the book, or on the first day of the workshops that she runs, to draw a self-portrait. And most of those self-portraits, when you see them, are really childish. And even if the person drawing them is, as I was, in their 40s, they're drawing these really kind of kid-like drawings that look ridiculous. And then a few days or weeks later, in my case, I started the book just before Christmas, and then I was interrupted by the holidays, so it took me about 3 or 4 weeks to get to the end. At the end, you do 2 portraits. You do 1 side profile of just a random person, or in my case, I did a Pinterest image that I found. And then the last thing that you do is you redo your self-portrait. Like I said, if you do a Google search, you can find hundreds of these, and I actually do think they're really good fun to look at. It's a really appealing improvement. So here are mine. As I said, the beginner one would not have looked amiss from a 7-year-old. Not great, not a great look if you're 41. And the after actually is not a good drawing, but it's very different in style and quality to the before. So there's loads of problems with the after drawing, but the impression that you're left with is of just an enormous improvement. And I have a couple of things to say about that. I think, first of all, the toning that you do of the paper covers an awful lot of sins. Like if my after portrait had been done linear on a white page with very little shading, I don't think the comparison would be nearly as effective. Like, toned paper can really make your work look great, in my opinion. Like, it's a real winner to make you look automatically just quite a lot better than you actually are. So that's the first problem, that the toned paper, I think, produces this artificial improvement, this artificial difference between the two. And the second is there's still a lot of symbolic drawing in my second portrait, particularly the nose and the mouth are really like much more like a symbol than they are like my actual nose and mouth. But I still was really happy with this. I really felt like this demonstrated that you could still learn to draw. You could improve your skills. You could learn something, and the outcome could be actually pretty good. I mean, like I said, it's not good, but it's not terrible. It's not like the original. So it seemed like it was worth doing. It seemed like it was worth learning. So in that respect, Betty Edwards' book absolutely 100% achieved its intention to get somebody who has no skills, no talent, no belief in their ability to draw, and convince them that actually you could learn to draw. That's a thing that you could do. The problem that I had was this was very early 2016. I couldn't kind of find things that I wanted to do that I found appealing, and some of the things that I would point someone to now have only been around since 2018, 2020, and later. So my problem, having finished Betty Edwards' book, was what exactly do I do now? So what I did for a little while was continue to draw profiles. So I got really hooked on drawing like side views of people's faces. So I drew quite a lot of them, and some of them turned out okay, and I was really proud of that. And then the kind of inevitable happened, which was that I got sick again. As I mentioned at the beginning, I started this because of chronic illness, and I got sick, and then when I got better, I just didn't know of a way back into it. I couldn't find my way back to the hobby or to the skills that I had. But I would still revisit it periodically. So in January 2017, for New Year's resolution, very successful, I went back through Betty Edwards' book again, and I drew some more heads, and then I did the same for about 3 weeks in 2018. And it wasn't really until you get to the second half of 2020 that I was like, no, actually, what would happen if I tried to do this consistently? And since then, I've tried quite a few things, and I've developed a pretty reasonable level of technical knowledge about how to draw the human face. By which I mean, I have a little skull, and I have drawn the planes of the face a lot, and I've done a bunch of classes on platforms like the New Masters Academy. What I haven't done is the volume of practice that you really need to do to get good at this stuff. So if I show you now on screen some of my most recent portraits, it's not great. It's not good. I haven't really progressed my skills particularly far. And I have to say, like, I'm showing you the best of my bad drawings. So this isn't even really indicative of my general drawing abilities when it comes to portraits. There are a lot of much worse portraits, and then there are thousands and thousands upon thousands of examples of me drawing just like standard heads in various positions. And that's really what I can do right now. Like, I can draw you a bald head with limited features in a variety of positions, but then I sit down with an actual face in front of me, usually drawing them from photos, and I'm like, okay, I can't really do this very well. I think part of the reason that drawing faces is so challenging is that when you draw it badly, it looks so wrong. Like it looks creepy and weird and unpleasant. Whereas if you draw a rhinoceros or a house wrong, you're not instantly recoiling from it in horror because it's creepy. You just think, oh, that's a bad drawing of a squirrel, and you move on with your life. But when it's a bad drawing of a person, you think, oh God, should I be doing this? Am I awakening an evil in the world that I can't put back in a box? It becomes disturbing. So that kind of puts me off. So having said all that, I haven't done as much practice of actually drawing faces as I know I need to do in order to improve. And so that's the first order of business. Just draw a lot of faces. And so for the next month or so, before you hear about me about portrait drawing again, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. Just drawing more portraits, drawing more people, trying to do a better job of drawing the ones I do, but forgiving myself when they turn out like creepy, hidden evils that need to be stuffed back in a box. I think it's also worth thinking about like where you want to go with this. I look at these highly rendered, dozens of hours of work have gone into creating this portrait, and I find that attractive, but not in a way where I really want to do it myself. And what I do really enjoy seeing is people who are able to produce these sort of quick, fairly small sketches, often in biro or ink, where they just they're little moments in time, little quick sketches. And so it's kind of a modest ambition, really, to say, oh, I want to be able to draw heads that are, the size of your hand, and I want to be able to do that with a big pen. It's a very moderately competent approach to drawing portraits. And who knows, maybe if I get to that stage where that actually isn't particularly challenging, I'll think, yeah, actually, I really want to move on beyond that, and I want to be able to do realistic portraits. Then I can imagine going that way. But for now, in the short to medium run, that's my focus. Simple media, fairly simple portraits, and of a fairly modest size, the kind of palm of your hand sized images. That's what I want to be able to do myself. So next week, I'm going to talk about the second of my 4 topics, which is figure drawing, which I have done much less of. It is much harder, even harder than portrait painting, and where one of the big things I struggle with is knowing what to do next in the face of this overwhelming mass of things that I do not know and do not understand. So that's next week, and in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to come along with me as I continue to talk about this and as I continue to try to become moderately competent at drawing, that you will like and subscribe and do all those YouTube things.